The soft chime of crystal glasses and the low hum of carefully disguised criticism drifted through the elegant dining room of La Maison, the city's most prestigious French restaurant. It was my father's 60th birthday, and everyone around the table insisted it was a celebration. From where I sat, though, it felt far more like another carefully staged reminder of where my family believed I belonged. My name is Olivia Winters, although everyone in my family insists on calling me Liv. It sounds harmless enough, but somehow they've always managed to use that nickname to make me feel smaller, like trimming a few letters from my name somehow trimmed away my worth. At 29, I'm the youngest of 3 siblings, and, according to the family narrative repeated for years, the lone disappointment in a family full of extraordinary achievers. I straightened the sleeves of my plain black blazer, something I'd picked up at a department store. Catherine had already found a way to mention that little detail twice before the appetizers even arrived. Around me, every member of my family wore luxury brands so obvious they practically announced themselves. Expensive watches gleamed beneath the lights, designer dresses shimmered with confidence, and enough diamonds sparkled around the table to buy a mansion outright. "Live, sweetheart," my mother Margaret said with that polished smile she reserved for public occasions. "Are you sure you don't want some wine? Your father is paying." She lingered on the word paying just long enough to remind everyone that the bottles they were ordering cost more than I supposedly earned in a week. "I'll stick with water, Mom. I have work later." James nearly laughed hard enough to choke on his foie gras. "Still waiting tables? Is it 3 years now? Maybe 4? 4, I answered calmly. "At the Bluebird Cafe." "A waitress," Catherine sighed dramatically, adjusting the Cartier bracelet on her wrist. "After graduating from Stanford. Dad, remember when she turned down Goldman Sachs? She could have been climbing the executive ladder by now." Dad barely looked up from scrolling through his phone. "Let's not spend tonight revisiting old disappointments. It's my birthday." I hid the smile threatening to appear. If any of them had known where I'd spent my morning, they wouldn't have been so relaxed. If they had seen the contracts waiting in my attorney's office, or known exactly what would appear on every news station before dinner was over, this conversation would have sounded very different. "Speaking of success," Catherine continued brightly, "James just finalized another acquisition. Go ahead, tell everyone." James straightened his Hermes tie with obvious satisfaction. "Winter's Investment acquired Peterson Tech this week. Not a huge company, but their artificial intelligence division has incredible potential. Honestly, we got them at an unbelievable price. They didn't even realize what they were sitting on." I quietly lifted my glass again. Just days earlier, Peterson Tech's CEO had called me sounding nervous. "Ms. Winters, are you absolutely certain this is the right move? Selling to your brother's company feels—" "Trust me, Tom," I'd assured him. "Everything is unfolding exactly as it should." "Liv." My mother's voice pulled me back to the present. "Were you even listening? Your brother was talking." "Sorry, just thinking about my work schedule." James smirked. "I imagine keeping track of coffee orders gets pretty complicated. What are they paying these days? Minimum wage and tips?" "Something like that." Catherine leaned closer, her diamond earrings catching the candlelight. "My friend Sarah's company is hiring administrative assistants. It's entry-level, but at least it's a respectable office job." "Thanks, but I'm happy where I am." "Happy?" Dad finally set his phone aside. "Olivia, you live in a tiny studio apartment in the roughest neighborhood in town. You drive a car that's practically older than your professional life. You haven't taken a vacation in years. That's not happiness. That's giving up." I glanced discreetly at my watch. 32 minutes. "We're only concerned because we love you," Mom added softly. "You had so much potential. Even your professors still ask about you. They always wonder what happened." What happened was something they could never have imagined. 4 years of relentless work. 4 years of building a company from the ground up while everyone assumed I was serving coffee. 4 years of staying invisible because it gave me the freedom to create something extraordinary without interference, expectations, or family influence. Every step had been intentional, and tonight every piece would finally fall into place. My phone vibrated beneath the table. Marcus, my CFO. Stock transfer complete. Press release goes live in 30. Ready? I smiled as I typed. Born ready. The whole family is here. James chuckled from across the table. At least she isn't asking us for money anymore. Everyone laughed. Catherine shook her head. Remember when she wanted us to invest in that little technology startup? What was it called? Winter Tech Solutions, I answered. That had been the original name. The dream I had pitched before realizing none of them would ever take me seriously, simply because it came from me. That rejection had taught me the most valuable lesson of my life. If they couldn't see my vision, I'd build it somewhere they couldn't interfere. I abandoned the name, created a completely different identity, and quietly built everything behind the scenes while continuing my job at the cafe. Good thing none of us wasted money on that idea, Mom said with complete confidence. Anyway, she continued, turning toward James, tell us about the new house. James eagerly described the estate he planned to buy. A private tennis court, a climate-controlled wine cellar, more bedrooms than anyone could possibly need. Everyone listened with admiration, while I simply watched the seconds disappear. 10 minutes. 5. 1. Then, without warning, the soft music playing throughout the restaurant stopped. Conversations around the room faded as every head turned toward the enormous television above the bar. The sports broadcast vanished, replaced by the unmistakable opening music of the evening news. Breaking news, the anchor announced. In what analysts are calling the largest technology acquisition in the city's history, the previously unknown company Phoenix Digital has revealed ownership of 12 major technology firms, including Peterson Tech. James's fork slipped from his hand and struck his plate with a sharp metallic clang. What? The anchor continued without pause. The combined value of these acquisitions now exceeds $4 billion. Even more surprising is the identity of Phoenix Digital's founder and chief executive. Every member of my family instinctively turned toward the screen at exactly the same moment. Then my corporate portrait appeared. Olivia Winters, who sources say secretly built her technology empire over the last 4 years, while continuing to work as a waitress at a neighborhood cafe. The silence that settled over our table was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. My mother's wine glass stopped halfway to her lips. My father's phone slipped from his hand and landed on the white tablecloth. For the first time in my life, nobody at that table had a single word to say. The shock on Catherine's face was almost painful to watch. The confidence she'd carried all evening disappeared in an instant, shattering as completely as delicate porcelain hitting a marble floor. I calmly reached for my napkin, dabbed the corner of my mouth, and rose from my chair with the same quiet composure I'd carried into the restaurant. I should get going, I said pleasantly. My shift starts in about an hour. James stared at me as though I'd begun speaking another language. Your shift? Of course. A small smile crossed my face. Not cruel, not mocking, simply satisfied. I own the cafe too. Actually, I also own this restaurant, and the building it's operating in. My eyes moved slowly around the table, meeting each stunned expression. It's incredible what you can accomplish when everyone is too busy underestimating you to notice what you're really building. I slipped on the same department store blazer they'd mocked all evening and picked up my practical handbag. Oh, and dinner is on me. The waiter looked almost as frozen as my family. Please, I continued, pausing just long enough to let the words settle. Order anything you'd like. I rested a hand lightly against the back of my chair before delivering the sentence I'd imagined for years. After all, I can't afford it. No one tried to stop me. As I crossed the dining room, I could hear conversations beginning to ripple through the restaurant. Guests glanced from the television to me and back again as recognition spread table by table. The woman they had just watched being dismissed by her own family had suddenly become the billionaire flashing across every news broadcast in the city. My phone vibrated before I reached the entrance. Marcus. Shares are already up 30%. Tomorrow's board meeting is confirmed. Ready? I stepped outside into the cool evening air, where a sleek black sedan waited at the curb. It certainly wasn't the aging Honda my family believed I still drove. I smiled as I typed my reply. More than ready. Then I added one more instruction. And Marcus, make sure the boardroom overlooks my brother's office tower. The one we finalized this morning. Because sometimes revenge isn't loud. It isn't angry. The sweetest kind arrives quietly, allowing people to realize, piece by piece, just how badly they misjudged you. And for me, that dinner had only been the opening chapter. The following morning, I walked into the office where I actually work. Not the employee break room behind the Bluebird Cafe. Not the tiny locker where I kept my apron. My real office occupied the entire top floor of Phoenix Digital's headquarters in the heart of downtown. Glass walls stretched from floor to ceiling, revealing a breathtaking skyline. As I looked across the city, I couldn't help smiling. Nearly every major district visible through those windows had, in one way or another, been touched by decisions I'd quietly made over the last 4 years, while everyone believed I was simply pouring coffee and refilling mugs. My phone hadn't stopped vibrating since leaving the restaurant. 47 missed calls from James. 32 from Catherine. 65 from Dad. 51 from Mom. And 248 text messages waiting to be read. I slowly scrolled through them while sipping my usual morning coffee. Ironically, it was still the inexpensive diner blend I'd grown to love during my years at the cafe. Wealth changes many things. Taste doesn't always have to be one of them. James had sent message after message. Olivia, answer your phone. This has gone far enough. We need to talk immediately. Mom's texts were softer. Sweetheart, please call. We're worried. Help us understand. Catherine's messages shifted between disbelief and panic. Why didn't you ever tell us? I can't believe this. Remember Sarah? She still thinks you're applying for that assistant position. Dad kept everything brief. Emergency family meeting. 9 o'clock. Conference room. Be there. I glanced at the clock. 8:57. By now, they would all be gathering inside the familiar conference room at Winters Investment Partners, expecting me to arrive the way I always had whenever the family demanded my presence. Instead, I opened my laptop. At exactly 9 o'clock, I emailed them a secure video conference link. My phone rang before I could even set it down. What is this? James snapped, barely containing his anger. If we're going to have this conversation, I replied evenly, we'll do it on my schedule. Just click the link. One after another, their faces appeared on my monitor. Dad sat at the head of the polished conference table. Overnight, he seemed to have aged years. Mom sat beside him, exhaustion written across her face. James paced restlessly behind his chair like a man searching for control he no longer possessed. Catherine remained perfectly dressed as always, but the rhythmic tapping of her manicured nails against the mahogany table betrayed her nerves. Dad spoke first. Why aren't you here? I leaned back slightly, allowing the skyline behind me to remain fully visible. My calendar is full this morning, I answered. I have 3 board meetings after this. Video seemed like the most efficient option. Efficient? James nearly shouted. You deceived us for years. You let us believe you were serving coffee while secretly building. A multi-billion-dollar technology company? I finished the sentence for him. Yes. He glared. You lied. I shook my head. No, I never lied. I paused deliberately. You simply never bothered asking the questions that mattered. Mom leaned closer to the camera, her voice trembling. We don't understand, Olivia. Why would you let us think? I finished that sentence too. That I was a failure? She lowered her eyes. That I was beneath everyone else? Silence answered. Because I wanted to know who believed in me without money. I shared my screen. A document appeared. This is the transcript from a family dinner 3 years ago. Dad immediately recognized it. You don't have to do this. Ignoring him, I began reading. Thank goodness James has what it takes to lead this family, unlike certain people who don't have the stomach for real success. The room fell quiet. Catherine shifted uncomfortably. People say things they don't mean. I clicked to another document. This one comes from only 2 months ago. Another transcript appeared. At Sarah's wedding, James described me as someone finding herself through menial work. I advanced again. Last Christmas, Catherine suggested I should apply for subsidized housing, because I obviously wasn't going anywhere. Another click. And last night, every one of you assumed I couldn't even pay for dinner inside a restaurant that belongs to me. Mom finally spoke. We were concerned. I met her gaze calmly. No. My voice remained quiet, but every word landed with unmistakable weight. You weren't concerned. You were comfortable. As long as I looked unsuccessful, you never had to question yourselves. I replaced the transcripts with financial reports. Logos, acquisition summaries, valuation charts, and investment figures filled the screen. While you were measuring success by job titles and appearances, I was building something real. I didn't inherit influence. I didn't depend on family connections. I created value through innovation, patience, and relentless work. James folded his arms. So what? A few lucky technology deals? I almost laughed. 12 strategic acquisitions. Some of the most valuable emerging technology companies in the market. As of this morning, our portfolio is valued at $4.7 billion. I let the number settle. And yes. I smiled. That includes Peterson Tech. James's expression collapsed. That's impossible. We had signed agreements. You had paperwork, I corrected. I had ownership. Tom Peterson has been working with Phoenix Digital for a long time. You spent months negotiating with someone you believed was independent. You never once investigated who controlled the intellectual property behind the company. You were too distracted by the waitress standing across from you. For the first time since the meeting began, James had no response. Dad slowly leaned toward the camera. The expression in his eyes had changed completely. It was no longer disappointment. It was the unmistakable look of a businessman finally realizing the person he'd dismissed for years had outplayed him at every single turn. I recognized that look immediately. It was the same expression my father had worn countless times across polished conference tables, whenever he was evaluating a potential business deal. His eyes narrowed ever so slightly, his posture relaxed, and the disappointment vanished behind the calm confidence of a seasoned negotiator searching for leverage. Olivia, he began, his voice suddenly smooth and measured. It's obvious we've underestimated you. The words might have sounded like an apology to someone else. To me, they sounded like strategy. Now that we understand what you've accomplished, he continued, there's no reason we can't work together. Phoenix Digital and Winter's investment would be far stronger as one company. Imagine what we could achieve by combining our experience, connections, and resources. I didn't hesitate. No. The single word landed with enough force to silence everyone. Catherine blinked in disbelief. What do you mean, no? I mean exactly what I said. I folded my hands on the desk. I'm not interested in a merger. I'm not looking for a partnership. And I'm certainly not going to hand over control of something I spent 4 years building, simply because you've finally decided it has value. Mom leaned toward the camera. But we're your family. I couldn't help smiling. Family? A quiet laugh escaped before I answered. Yesterday, I was the daughter you apologized for whenever someone asked what I did for a living. I looked from one face to another. I was the sibling everyone pitied. The embarrassment. The cautionary tale. And today, because there's a number with several commas attached to my name, suddenly I'm family again? No one spoke. Instead, I opened one final file. This concerns your headquarters. James frowned. What about it? The lease on the Winters Investment Building expires in 60 days. Dad's expression shifted. I've decided not to renew it. James shot upright so quickly his chair rolled backward. You can't be serious. I am. That building has been our headquarters for 3 decades. Yes, I replied evenly. And in 60 days it won't be. His face flushed. You don't have the authority. Actually, I answered, I do. I own the property. And I've already instructed my legal team to prepare the transition. The silence that followed was heavier than anything we'd experienced the night before. I hope you'll think of it as an educational experience. James stared at me. What is that supposed to mean? It means appearances can be expensive when you rely on them instead of facts. I glanced at the clock on the wall. My next meeting starts in 5 minutes. Mom looked desperate. Please don't end this like this. I'm afraid I have to. I'll be meeting with the governor this morning to discuss expanding Phoenix Digital's investment initiative and helping turn the city into a national technology center. I smiled politely. An actual meeting. In person. Dad opened his mouth. Olivia. But my hand was already resting on the disconnect button. Oh, one more thing. James looked up. You'll probably want to clean out your office before the end of the month. I paused just long enough. I hear we'll need the extra space. A small smile crossed my face. Some of us former waitresses may need somewhere to store the cleaning supplies. The screen went dark. For a long moment, I simply leaned back in my chair, breathing out years of tension I hadn't even realized I was carrying. The silence lasted only a few seconds before my intercom buzzed. Ms. Winters? My assistant's cheerful voice filled the office. The governor's office is holding on line 1. I adjusted my blazer. Today it happened to be Armani. Ironically, nobody in my family would have noticed the difference anyway. Put him through. And Sarah? Yes? Please send a gift basket to everyone at the Bluebird Cafe. She sounded amused. Any particular reason? They're probably about to receive several very emotional visitors. I'd like them to know I appreciate everything they've done. You got it. As I reached for the phone, my eyes settled on the framed photograph sitting beside my monitor. It had been taken on my very first day at the cafe. My apron strings were uneven. My name tag sat crooked across my shirt. I looked nervous, hopeful, and completely unaware of how much that little restaurant would change my life. Betty had insisted on taking the picture. She wasn't just the woman who trained me. She became one of the greatest teachers I'd ever known. Not because she understood venture capital or software development. Because she understood people. One afternoon, while we were wiping down tables after closing, she'd smiled and told me something I'd never forgotten. Sometimes you have to start at the bottom. I asked why. So you never forget what the view looks like when you're climbing. Those words stayed with me through every rejection, every late-night coding session, every investor meeting, and every quiet victory no one else ever saw. Everything I'd built stood on that foundation. And I knew I was only beginning. The following 2 weeks unfolded almost exactly the way I'd predicted. My family didn't accept the truth. Instead, they tried to rewrite it. Rumors began circulating through country clubs, charity galas, and executive lunches. Apparently, no one like me could possibly become wealthy honestly. Surely there had to be hidden investors. Illegal shortcuts. Secret backers. Anything but talent. Apparently, serving coffee disqualified a person from becoming successful. I found the irony almost entertaining. One afternoon, while reviewing another acquisition proposal, my office door opened abruptly. Sarah stepped inside. "Your sister is downstairs." She hesitated. "She doesn't have an appointment." I switched the monitor to the lobby security cameras. There stood Catherine. Designer handbag clutched tightly against her side like armor. She looked strangely out of place among the software engineers, designers, and developers, moving comfortably through our open workspace, wearing jeans and sneakers. "Send her up." A minute later, she entered my office. Her eyes wandered around the room before settling on the skyline. She'd expected wealth. She hadn't expected this. The office was intentionally understated. Simple furniture. Clean lines. Very little decoration. She finally broke the silence. "The view is incredible." Then she added, almost automatically, "The furniture feels a little plain." I glanced at my desk. I'd chosen it because it reminded me of Betty's old workstation at the cafe. Nothing more. Nothing less. "What do you need, Catherine?" She placed a folder on the desk. "I've been reviewing some family records." I waited. "I think I found something." She opened the folder carefully. "As the oldest sibling, I may have certain claims involving businesses connected to the Winters family name." I raised one hand gently. "You can stop there. Phoenix Digital has absolutely no legal connection to Winters Investment. I made sure of that from the very beginning." Her shoulders dropped. "I thought, maybe. You hoped there was a shortcut." She sighed. "Dad and James are struggling. They're devastated about losing the building." "No," I corrected quietly. "They're devastated because they lost control. The building is only a symbol." She finally looked me in the eye. "They asked me to make you an offer." I assumed they would. "You'll lease the headquarters back to them if they stop questioning your business practices." She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Her silence confirmed everything. I leaned forward. "Here's what's actually going to happen. You'll leave this office. You'll tell them intimidation isn't a business strategy. And next week—" I smiled. "They'll watch Phoenix Digital acquire the Wilson portfolio." Her eyes widened. "The Wilson portfolio?" "James has been chasing that deal for nearly 2 years." "I know." She stared at me. "How could you possibly know that?" "Because I own the building where your board meetings take place." I shrugged. "And unlike your executives, I actually talk to the maintenance staff. They notice everything." Before she could respond, my phone vibrated. A security alert flashed across the screen. James Winters attempting unauthorized access to server room B. I smiled despite myself. Perfect timing. Catherine frowned. "What happened?" "Our brother is downstairs attempting to break into a restricted area." Her face lost all color. "How do you know already?" "Cameras. They're remarkably effective." I stood. "Come with me. You may as well see how this ends." We rode the private elevator to the lower level. As the doors opened, 2 security officers were calmly holding James near the secured server entrance. Both of them had once worked beside me at the Bluebird Cafe before earning promotions within Phoenix Digital. I looked at my brother. Searching for something? He struggled against their grip. There has to be something. Nobody builds a company this large this quickly without hiding something. I nodded thoughtfully. Without what? Without working harder than everyone else? Without understanding technology before investing in it? without treating every person, whether they're serving coffee or leading a company, with the same respect? Then I turned calmly toward the security officers and gave them a quiet nod. The two security officers didn't hesitate. I watched James for a moment before speaking again. Do you know something interesting? He glared at me but stayed silent. These men once worked beside me at the Bluebird Cafe. They poured coffee, wiped tables, greeted customers with a smile, and most people walked right past them without ever learning their names. I looked toward the guards with quiet pride. I didn't see job titles. I saw discipline. I saw integrity. I saw people capable of far more than anyone had ever given them credit for. Today they oversee security for one of the fastest-growing technology companies in the country, because someone finally believed in what they could become. Catherine stepped forward, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. Olivia. She paused, searching for the right words. You've proven your point. There was genuine exhaustion in her expression now. What do you actually want from us? I smiled gently. Nothing. The answer seemed to confuse her even more. I don't need anything from any of you. That's the part you've never understood. I didn't build Phoenix Digital because I had something to prove. I built it because I wanted to create something meaningful. I didn't stay at the cafe because I had no other options. I stayed because I chose to. There's a difference between being trapped somewhere and deciding that's exactly where you need to be. I nodded toward the security officers. Please escort my brother outside. They calmly led James toward the exit. Just before the doors closed behind him, I spoke one last time. And James? He stopped without turning around. If you attempt to enter this building without authorization again, I'll involve the authorities. I let the words settle. Family doesn't exempt anyone from consequences. That evening, long after the office had quieted, an email arrived from my father. I read it twice before setting my phone down. He admitted that he and Mom had spent the day reflecting on everything that had happened. He acknowledged that perhaps they had been wrong about my choices. He confessed that the firm was struggling after losing its headquarters, and admitted my recent successes had forced him to reconsider everything he thought he knew about business. Then came the final line. Would you have dinner with me? Just the two of us. No negotiations. No proposals, just a father trying to understand his daughter. I sat staring at the screen for several minutes. Memories flooded back. Family dinners where my ideas barely earned a response. Conversations where everyone spoke around me instead of to me. Years spent feeling invisible while sitting only a few feet away. Eventually, I began typing. Dinner sounds good. But not at La Maison. Meet me at the Bluebird Cafe. That's where the lessons that mattered were learned. If you truly want to understand me, begin by understanding the people who helped shape me. Come alone. No James. No Catherine. No hidden motives. The following evening, I slipped into my usual booth at the Bluebird, with a mug of fresh coffee warming my hands. The familiar sounds filled the room. Plates clinking. Orders being called. Students studying over inexpensive meals. Construction workers ending long shifts. Families stretching every dollar without sacrificing time together. The bell above the entrance rang. Dad stepped inside wearing one of his perfectly tailored suits. He looked completely out of place among the regular customers, yet no one seemed particularly interested in who he was. To them, he was simply another guest. He slid into the booth across from me. This is certainly different, he admitted as he glanced around. I figured it would be. He looked at the laminated menu with the curiosity of someone encountering an entirely different world. I still don't understand why you chose this path. Why didn't you simply tell us what you were building? I met his eyes. Would you have listened? He didn't answer. Or would you have tried to reshape it into something that matched your definition of success? The silence between us lasted longer this time. Finally, he sighed. We believed we were protecting you. I shook my head. No. You were protecting your expectations. You had already decided what success should look like. You never stopped to ask whether I wanted something different. Just then Betty walked over carrying her order.